should give me either the either or the either. I told you we're out of Phoenix Down. Okay, alright!
Hi, you're listening to MageCast, the ensemble podcast by the well-read mage and a cast of mages. Each episode, I sit down with my rotating panel of guests to have some civil discourse about a single game. We're a group of games writers dedicated to long-form content and critique. You can find us on WordPress at thewellreadmage.com, on Twitter at thewellreadmage, and on YouTube. Crowdfunding support makes projects like MageCast possible. If you enjoy our work, written or otherwise, you can check out our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/The Well-Read Mage for more information on exclusives, rewards, and our vision for a future of better games writing and a friendlier gaming community. Links are in the description. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share MageCast with your fellow adventurers. Leave us a review, too. Oh, and now let's start the show. All right, let's do this crappy thing.
Yeah. Let's do this Grim Fandango.
All right. Yes. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of MageCast. I'm your host, the well-read mage, a.k.a. Moses the Infirm Norton. I am the infirm now because I've fallen sick. I've fallen ill, not to sound like a stereotypical vlog, like, sorry guys, I haven't updated in 9 months. I've been kind of sick. But there you go. So I'm doing this special episode because I'm actually sitting here with a person that validates the affirmative to the question, are online friends real friends? The answer is yes. Because this guy came to visit me, dude. Like, that's pretty cool.
What?
Yeah. And what? Like, you're here.
Oh, yeah, I am here.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah. So I'm sitting down, I'm talking with the great, the late, he was a little late, the late, the great ABXY Mage. I found him in a box on the side of the street, took him home, renamed him Sprinkles. It's just, it's been a great visit. We played some Smash. So I'm glad to have you, dude. It's pretty awesome to have you in my house.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we ate some steaks earlier,
yes,
dude.
We
like,
did.
Yeah,
they
it
were
was
delicious.
Super great. Yeah, they were good. I asked my wife to buy more steaks next time, just for myself. Yeah, like we have no guests, but let us eat more steaks.
Can never have too much steak.
No, that's not true. Well, it probably is. But so by way of introduction, Brent, I just wanted to I'll just touch bases with you. You've been on this podcast quite a few times. You're doing your own podcast now.
Yes.
They grow up so fast. And what are you playing now? So tell us about your podcast. Tell us what you're playing, that sort of thing.
Okay. Let's see. I'll start with what I'm playing, which is Smash. I just finished Time Spinner, which I'll be writing a review for in the next week or so.
Nice. So just basic premise of your review on Time Spinner. Yay or nay sort of thing.
I would say more on the yay side.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of potential. I don't think it lived up to all of the potential it had.
I see.
There's a lot of good ideas there. I hope that they make another one,
Mm-hmm.
just so that they can add more depth to it. There were certain features about it that in theory seemed really cool, and then in practice just weren't in depth enough, weren't fleshed out enough.
Yeah, so maybe it needed more time in the oven.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
But they nailed a lot of the stuff they were going for. So overall, I would say it's definitely worth playing.
Cool. Well, we'll look forward to reading that review. I'm playing Smash, of course. I cannot get away from that game. Trying to be a Mega main, and maining Mega Man is hard. I'm going to say that because I lose a lot. It's just
That's your excuse.
it's a hard character to play as, you guys.
I haven't unlocked him yet, so I wouldn't know.
Well, you could play him at my house if you want.
I guess that's true.
I wouldn't recommend it, though. He's technical. But you are who's your main?
My main is Ness.
Ness. So you're a Ness main. So you're
PK
that.
Fire!
So you're that guy that
Yeah.
online
Oh,
where,
yeah.
like when a Ness character
Yep.
pops up and you're like, I can't believe.
It's me.
Yeah.
But you'll know it's me because I always play as Bumblebee Ness.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you go.
I never use his regular
I
look for some
have to
reason.
play as Blue Mega Man because if he's any other color, I'll lose sight of him. I'm already trained to look for the blue.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I don't play Lucas as much now is because the outfit I used to play with him as isn't in this one.
Oh, yeah. So your eye's not trained for that.
No.
I'm also playing The Way Remastered, which has been a fun, very old school kind of feeling game, sci-fi.
What is it? I've never heard of it.
It's an adventure game. It was 99 cents on the eShop.
Huh. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And there was a game that I wanted to pick up at launch, and I didn't make it. But yeah, very cool sci-fi stuff going on in there. It's about like a guy whose girlfriend dies. Well, I assume a girlfriend. Somebody he cares about who's a woman dies, and he's an archaeologist, it seems like, for alien civilizations.
Okay.
And together they discovered a civilization that believed in some kind of like eternal life schema.
Okay.
And so he takes her body to the planet, and he's trying to like decipher the this myth, this concept, to see if he can bring her back to life. So very interesting game, very fun. When
is it from?
Too hard. I couldn't tell you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know if is it old though.
Well, it's a remaster.
Oh, okay.
Of the original. Well, let's just look it up real quick. So The Way Remastered. So the remaster came out.
Yes, it did come out.
The remaster came out April 20th, 2018. Oh, the original was 2016. So that's
not that
behind. Long at
okay.
all. But very much inspired by titles like Flashback and Another World. Another World is one of my favorite games. So, and then I'm also playing Gris, Gris. Not sure how it's pronounced. Pretty sure it's not Grease. Pretty sure.
Gris sounds better.
Gris sounds better than Grease. But that's been real fun. I'm playing that with my wife right now. Really enjoying just a peaceful game at the end of the day. It's kind of like sitting down with a novel, sitting down, listening to some calming music, that sort of thing. But today we're going to... Oh, before I jump into that, I beg your pardon. A couple other sort of preliminary things that I wanted to talk about is we've launched a subreddit now called the Well Reddit page. Get it? Get it? Yeah. So the goal of this page is sort of to solve a problem that I was seeing having, not really a problem, just like a gap in communication. So one of my favorite things about what we do at the Well-Read Mage is communication, is conversation, discussion, that sort of thing. And trying to have discussion that promotes positivity and civility. It's not always possible because we're human beings, we fail, so on and so forth. But, there's thousands of blogs, there's thousands of different sites, there's thousands of different streamers and tubers and content creators and influencers, and all these people, and they each have their own pocket community. So trying to step toward figuring out a way to bring communities together, bring people together, and unite multiple people across social media is something that I'm interested in doing. Obviously, I'm not a programmer, so I can't develop my own platform.
Right.
But it makes sense to me that Reddit is the largest forum-based site on the internet. It makes sense to me to have a forum-based platform where people can converse, step away from the conversation, come back to the conversation without worrying about, say, a chat feed scrolling too quickly. I mean, even sometimes I'll be on the chat in Discord and our chat will just scroll too quickly. There's too many people talking.
Yeah, or there's two intense chats in two different rooms going on at the same time, and I end up just picking one. Right,
and you can't, you literally cannot do both because it's happening in real time. So something that's nice about forums is they kind of step away from real time, and it seems like you're able to have a more measured conversation. So one of the things that I really want to make a vision for this subreddit is for communities to be able to share their ideas into it or share their works into it. So yeah, it's open for promotion. So if you're a streamer, if you're a blogger, whatever, and you have a community, bring that community and help us to bring communities together and share these things so that it's not just like throwing out promotions into the void and things like that. Maybe you don't have so many followers on Twitter or Instagram or what have you, but maybe we can together make a central core place where we can feed ideas into it, feed links into it, and have a better time for it. And try to stay clear of the typical Reddit troll. Yeah.
I have no experience on Reddit. So.
No experience?
No.
Oh. My first day on Reddit, somebody said, gosh, what was it? Give me a second. He said, "This guy is obnoxiously bitter," referring to myself. And it's one of those insults that's like so original as like chuckle worthy, But yeah, that was my first.
Appreciated it more than hurt by it.
Right, yeah. Like I'm pretty sure you couldn't judge my entire character by a single like post that I shared.
I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah, well, he did. He did, but not accurately.
Oh, okay. Accurately,
yeah, you got to know somebody a little more than that. Anyways, next item of business is I wanted to thank our newest patrons, the new Warriors of Light. I'm actually sitting across from one right now.
What?
Bob over here. No, just kidding. Brent decided to become a Warrior of Light, so thank you for your support, sir.
I waited too long.
Well, it's all good. I will always be that lighthouse keeper that goes to the end of the dock every day to wait for you, the Queen of Atlantis, to come out of the... Have you seen Aquaman?
No.
Okay, well, you get the analogy anyway.
I do.
Yeah. The other guys I want to give a shout out to, Chris Durston, the sometimes vaguely philosophical mage, a.k.a. Overthinkery. Chris, thank you very much for your support. Is it Overthinkery or Overthinker-Y? I always said Overthinkery in my head.
That's what I always say in my head, too.
Maybe you could correct us, Chris, or affirm our pronunciations. Thank you also to Gaming Steve 31 or 3L. No longer with us as a supporter, but thank you for supporting us for the time that you were able to. Very much appreciated. We also have Play Jack Sayback and Shadow Sao Tome and Kevin Harbin. I think I gave Kevin a shout out on a previous podcast, but these are all the most recent supporters that we've had. Thank you very much. You guys help keep the lights on, the subscriptions going, the content pushing forward, and most importantly, the vision fueled. The vision for the Well-Read Mage to build this this new kind of future for gaming content where there's not so much isolation, there's not so much toxicity, there's not so much de-emphasis on community. I know there's a lot of people that are looking for that sort of thing out there. We just have to find each other and build this future together. And now on to the actual show, wherein we're going to talk about Grim Fandango Remastered.
Yeah.
Right? Because neither of us have played the original game.
No, never.
Okay, never. I haven't. The first time I heard of this game was after the remaster had already been out.
Same.
Yeah. I bought it on sale. I'm pretty sure on recommendation. I want to say from the Timely Mage. And really enjoyed the heck out of it. So as we get into Grim Fandango, we just want to touch briefly on like what's so special about this game. One of the things really is the premise, right? And I was wondering if you would be so kind, because you did like a video thing recently, right?
Watched some videos, yeah. So the premise of the game, yeah. So basically, you play Manny Calavera, who is a travel agent in the land of the dead. And it is his job as travel agent to get dead and lost souls to their final resting place in the, what do they call it, the ninth circle?
Right. So it's sort of like a purgatorial concept, right?
Yeah. And then basically how good you lived your life determines how long your travel is.
Uh-huh.
So people who have a really bad life, they have to walk, and it takes them 4 years. And people who led really good, virtuous lives can take an express train that gets them there in 4 minutes.
Right. And why was it that Manny stayed and was employed there?
They don't actually say. They just say he has he has a debt that he's paying off.
Okay.
But who the debt is to, we never find out. And obviously he's not the only, there's another travel agent who works there. There's the receptionist, his boss.
Well, there's a
whole city.
Yeah, there's like various civilizations, right, in this purgatorial area that just sort of remain there.
So I'm not sure, and I wondered this too, because I know later when you go to Rubikava, you find the very first customer that Manny has that he sent off. And you run into him there, and he's working as like a janitor at the diner that later becomes the casino.
Right.
And I always thought, I could see if while you were on your journey, you stop because you're bored, tired, interested in the place you've stopped in, whatever the case is. But I don't know what you would have, why you would be trapped, or what your debt would be.
Right,
or
because
who it would be to.
presumably if they're already dead, they have no needs, right?
Right.
Like, as human beings, if you're traveling somewhere, you would stop because you would need money or sustenance or something like
Right.
that. But like, what are they going to do? Starve to death? You know, they're already dead.
Right.
Unless there's a second area. Anyways, but I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So he's a travel agent. And what sort of propels him on this adventure?
So they kind of allude to the fact that, years earlier, he was the top agent at the company, like on the fast track to paying off his debt and getting to his final resting place. At some point, his nemesis in the company ends up becoming the top salesman, and now it's been, years since Manny's had a decent client, and he can't figure out why. So he decides to cheat the system and steal one of his rival's customers.
Right.
Which ends up being the love interest, Mercedes Colomar.
And this is very much, we'll get into that, but this is very much film noir.
Yes.
Influence. So this is the dame.
Yes.
Right? That
the
walks
dame
into
who comes
the
into the office and needs help.
Yeah.
Helpless. She doesn't know what to do. So he steals her as a client. And while he steals her because after he finds out who she is, he looks up her record. He sees that she did volunteer work for charities. He knows she's guaranteed to get that express trip, which is more commission for him. But then when he takes her into the office and pulls up her file, she doesn't qualify for anything, which he doesn't understand. So later he gets caught, and his boss yells at him for stealing the customer and explains how she was supposed to ride the train, and now she's walking, all because Manny screwed it up, which kind of triggers the entire premise of the game, which is that there's some kind of conspiracy going on at the Department of Death, which is keeping rightful owners of train tickets from receiving them. And so Manny ends up getting fired, actually, before he leaves, and leaves to chase after Mercedes and try and help her get to her final resting place, while also figuring out what this conspiracy is.
Yeah, that was beautifully phrased. That was great. No, that was great. That was not one of those long-winded Wikipedia articles where you're like, okay, too much detail.
If anything, I'm usually guilty of the opposite.
Of being too concise?
Yes.
Wow. No, that was beautifully concise. We are talking about the remastered version of this game.
Correct.
So one of the things that I thought was really cool, and this is something I love when remasters do this. One of my favorite games, Another World, Eric Chahi, they had the ability to swap between the remastered and the original graphics at the touch of a button. I love that. Every scene, I was like, what does this look like in the original?
Right.
What does it look like? And you get so curious about that. And rather than just playing one version or the other. So that was one feature, right? In the remastered version, they touched up the graphics, touched them up really well.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's if you can you can Google side-by-side images. It's crazy, the difference.
Yeah. No, they did a really good job of still preserving to the way that the original game looked and felt, and the camera angles obviously are very important in a game like this.
I feel like the remaster did what a lot of remasters don't necessarily do quite as well, which is you could tell when you're playing the Grim Fandango remaster that that's how they saw it in their head when they made it originally. Now they just have the ability to clean it up and actually make it look that way.
This is a comment from @Kitsuwaji on Twitter, aka Outrunner. Well, I like it a lot, always have. Not much else I can say about it. No one else hasn't said by now. The remaster is nice, but I still play it in the way that makes it look like the original. There's that. I think that's a cool selling point for remasters. What are some other changes that they made in the remaster. You were telling me about a couple earlier.
I know they redid the soundtrack so that the sound would be better.
And I think that's real important.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I guess I can't say I don't know what the soundtrack sounded like in the original.
Okay, I tried listening to it a
play it.
couple times. Well, you didn't play it. I didn't play it either. But I listened to it a couple times. It's very much more D-Mades type sounding.
Okay.
MIDI sounds, synthetic sounds. Whereas
which is hard to imagine having heard the remastered soundtrack.
Right, and the remastered soundtrack sounds amazing. Sounds super good.
Yeah, it's one of my top game soundtracks.
Yeah, definitely. If you have not listened to the Grim Fandango soundtrack by Peter McConnell, it's amazing. I listen to this one all the time. This one and Cuphead are two of my favorite jazz soundtracks. Cuphead has an amazing, tangible, organic, present sound to it that's really here in Grim Fandango. You have any favorite tracks on this? I know you do.
Grim Fandango? Ooh, I really love Blue Casket Bop. I wish it was longer. I think it's a little under 2 minutes.
Yeah, a lot of the songs are fairly short on this.
But, I mean, when you compare it to, like, Casino Calavera's, like, I think 3.5 maybe. I mean, 1.5 minutes, that's, a lot longer than 1:50.
Right, and a lot of these will loop when you're playing the game.
Right. But Blue Casket Bop I love so because of how much I love jazz, obviously. Bop's my favorite subgenre of jazz.
Yeah.
So I really wanted that to be like a 5-minute track.
Yeah, I wish. Oh, man, imagine seeing this soundtrack performed live.
I would love that.
It'd be amazing. And I think another good one, we were just listening to it earlier, is Mr. Frustration Man.
Yes, that made it into the first mix for January for the Well-Read Mage Radio.
It's so good. I love that song. You remember any other ones off the top of your head here? I don't know. Manny's Office sounds good. There's a lot of Gambling Glottis.
I can't remember if it's Domino. It's one of them has a really good baritone or clarinet sound in it.
Yeah.
Line, and I can't remember which song it is though.
It has a good range of instrumentation
and styles.
Yeah. A lot of the times you'll see, like, with jazz, especially in noir, they'll stick to just one kind of sound. I haven't played it, but was it L.A. Noir? I have not played, but I enjoy listening to bits of that soundtrack too. And that one has very much a much more consistent sound.
Yeah.
Simple sound, you would say. A more unified compared to the variety that you get with Grim Fandango.
I think part of it with Grim Fandango, though, is, it took inspiration from so many different things, and each of the worlds that you travel to in the game are so different from each other that just having one thematically similar soundtrack would have been really out of place in certain parts of the game.
That's a good point. I mean, this is an adventure game. So by the very nature of going on a quest, you're sort of visiting all these different settings. So that does make sense. There's someone I was talking with today. I kind of want to find their name here. This was at official Vimes, Vimes, on Twitter. We had this great civil exchange of ideas. I love when this happens, especially on Twitter. Twitter is not a platform that's built for conversation.
No kidding.
Yeah. It's built for, like, sharing GIFs and sharing. Did I say GIFs or GIFs? I said both at the same time. I don't know. The world will never know.
Makes everyone happy.
Yeah, you can't rewind this either. It'll explode. But we had this great exchange of ideas on the tried question of whether games are art, but from the perspective of in the context of including music. So music, I think most people would agree music is art. But essentially what they mean is music is an art form.
Right.
They don't really mean that all music is equally artistic, or even that all music is artistic. You whip out your smartphone right now and go to the ringtone section, and some of it's actually quite awful. It's a little jangle. It might be catchy, but it might be awful at the same time. Especially like, I always check out the jazz ones whenever I get a new phone, and it's always the worst.
It's always terrible.
Yeah, it just.
It's never jazz. That's the problem.
Yeah, or the sunny morning. And you're like, this is. It's music still.
Technically.
Well, I mean, in
It
terms,
is.
it's music technically, which you're right. and it's got, notes that follow a melody and harmony and so on and so forth that you can lay out on sheet music, but it's pretty bad. It's not artistic in the same sense as like some of my favorite music is classical music. I mean, I am still one of my favorite composer of all time, Chopin. I never get tired of listening to his music. I was listening to Spring Waltz the other day, and I was just like, dude, this song is amazing. It is so good. The amount of emotion that is conveyed in one instrument is just mind-blowing. And last December, I did this thing where I was posting a different classical piece every day, and that really enriched me. It really got me into like appreciating new composers and new songs that I hadn't really heard before, and then sharing favorites. But it's like, so you take classical music and jazz, because I know you're a jazz guy, and we got into this before. I said jazz is the modern classical. Is that what I said?
I think that is what you said.
Okay, which is true. But we got in. Yeah, that was a fun talk. But so jazz, you would say, okay, so let me ask you, what is the pinnacle of human musical achievement?
Jeez.
Could I make the question bigger? Just in terms of genres. I mean, you would probably say jazz,
I would say
right?
jazz, yeah.
Yeah. See, I would say classical. And I'd say everything since then has been the degradation of our culture, but in musical terms. But I think we would both agree, and where we kind of ended that talk, right, is we would both agree that jazz and classical are extremely technical pieces of music in different ways. Like there's much more emphasis on improvisation in jazz.
Certainly.
There's still improvisation in classical, but in terms of the composition rather than performance. Right, is what we came up with. So there were a lot of like classical pieces that were not well received in their time when they were released. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I was killing time like a couple months ago watching various documentaries on composers, and it's interesting, like some of them just were not famous during their lifetime, and then somebody
It's
would
very strange.
Yeah. And you're like, who would listen to this and be like, this is crap?
Especially since it's not like, it wasn't then like it is now where anybody could just do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, these were people that like dedicated their entire lives to the composition of musical pieces.
Of course, depending on what time period it is, I mean, probably hard to make a name for yourself when Mozart's out there.
Yeah, exactly. And there's examples of other. Well, Mozart didn't even live that long anyway, so there's that for everybody else. But oh gosh, what was I saying? Where's that train of thought going? I don't know. It's gone. But we'll just say, so in terms of the technical prowess of classical and jazz, these are definitely realms of music where you say this is art, for sure. Because it involves the human processes of creation. Right. It involves skill, planning, execution, performance, inflection, intonation, all these things where people put thematic power into nonverbal communication, music. And yet, as we were saying earlier, you gave the example of ringtone music that's not very good. But we would still say that music is an art form. Right. So in the same sense, video games. Video games, I would say, in my view, and in your view too, I believe, right? Yep. Are an art form, even though there are not very artistic examples. Even though there are the equivalent of ringtones. Yes. Candy Crush is the big horse to beat, right? Farmville is another one. I played
People still play Farmville?
I don't know. I thought this is perfect. Okay, so Black Humor Mage reposted a memory that he had. It was just some joke that he did on Facebook. I don't know how long ago it was, but he was like, so I logged into my Farmville account 2 years later today, after not having been on it for 2 years, I mean. And I found out that it turned into Animal Farmville. And everybody was just, I think I screwed up that joke. He phrased it differently. But I thought it was really hilarious.
I think I know where you're going.
Right. That like all the animals, like, you know, decided they were equal, but some animals are more equal than others and all this stuff. Anyway, so I don't know. I don't know why my mind went to that, but more importantly, I don't know if anybody plays Farmville today. But you get the point that we could go on and on listing tons of games that are not artistic in the least. Now, they might involve, the composition of colors as a creative process. They might involve things like having to come up with character design or visuals and things like that, or even crafting their own music that involve creative processes. But that's precisely why they're still an art form, broadly speaking, even though they're not artistic,
right?
Individually speaking. So coming back to Grim Fandango after that long thing.
Oh, are we talking about Grim Fandango?
Yeah. How do you classify Grim Fandango? Broad art form only or artistic?
I would say artistic.
Okay, and then why? I mean, we just talked about the music, so that's an easy one.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Right. So it's like if music is art and games contain music, then games at least contain some art.
Yeah, true. I would say at least certain parts of the visuals. There's a perfect example when you visit the land of the living at the beginning, and
oh yeah,
the graphics are all like cut out pieces of magazines pasted together.
I thought that was brilliant.
It is.
Rather than show you, this is of course what real life looks like. It shows you this weird perspective on real life from the unlife of those who are dead.
Right.
Yeah. And there was a one guy who died in a diner, right? And he was in a cocoon, and then
he's in the body bag, and you use your scythe to get him out.
Right. It was a body bag. I assumed it was a cocoon, which is thematically what was happening.
Yeah. Or I guess maybe maybe that's what it is in the world. I don't know. That doesn't make sense either, though. I don't know. It's very strange because I guess at that point you're kind of in both worlds at the same time.
Yeah. Well, surreal would have been what we're getting at with that scene. It's very surreal.
Yeah.
So surely drawing from surrealism as a movement within art history. That's another indication. I think about the character design in the game. I really love how diverse the characters look.
I agree.
There's not a lot of characters that look exactly the same, or if they do, then it's on purpose.
Which is impressive considering they're all skeletons.
Right. Well, then you have Glottis, right?
Yeah.
Who was a fire demon?
A demon, yeah.
Right. Who worked as a mechanic. Yeah. A hilarious character.
Glottis is
that
great.
Guy's voice.
Yeah.
Everything
about him.
Right, and we'll get to the voice casting in a bit. I do want to jot that down. But yeah, aside from Glottis, he also had like the worker bees.
Yep.
Who I was specifically thinking of in terms of the uniformity of their appearance. But that makes sense. They're worker bees.
Right.
But even just like you said with the skeletons, there's a huge array of skeletons. They don't all have these bizarre long heads like Manny Calavera does.
Well, and you've got like Hector is fat somehow, even though he's a skeleton.
Well, maybe they gain weight by like their bones expanding in different ways, but I don't know. They're all very much caricatures of their position and of their personalities, right? So Manny is very short, and they play this great visual prank on you.
That's great. Yeah, when he's tall for the first 10 minutes of the game.
Right, and dressed in the Grim Reaper outfit, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, that's essentially his job as a Grim Reaper, blah, blah, blah. And then he steps out of the costume, and he has leg braces on that make him appear taller. And that's such a great visual character cue as to, like, this is a guy who maybe has some self-image issues for his job, you know, and has some sense of confidence issues going on with him.
I wondered, that's funny that you said it that way. I never thought of it like it was self-confidence issues. In my head, it was always, they told him he had to do that. Like, look, Grim Reapers are supposed to be 6 feet tall.
Right, but then think of Hector. Hector was like several heads taller than Manny.
That's
right?
true.
Well, Manny has a tall head. but he was several Hector heads tall. So and there was different heights.
Yeah.
Certainly, even like what was the name of the woman, the dame?
Meche.
Meche.
Mercedes Colomar.
Oh, beautiful pronunciation. She was tall too.
She's taller than Manny
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Which so.
But she's not as tall as Olivia,
right. The poet, right?
the femme fatale.
Yeah, the femme fatale. Oh, I love it. Maybe okay. So we were talking about anime earlier. I don't want to go off on this tangent because I always
It's fine.
do.
I don't know much about anime.
Okay,
so it
neither
can't
do
last
I.
that long.
But we were talking about how anime has so many like stereotypical characters.
Yeah.
We were playing Smash. That's what it was. And you're like, oh, I'm getting beaten by whichever Fire Emblem character this is. I was like, well, he's got red hair, so he's obviously the fiery one. Like, it's just such a like. You really like when a hair color describes how the entire personality of a character is going to play out.
Yep.
You got a problem with your storytelling mode. Now, given that there's several animes that subvert those expectations and play around with them in interesting ways, but anyways. That aside, I feel like in this game, they do some of that too, but it's much more visual as to the character. So like you say, you have the fat skeleton, the robust skeleton. Like Hector, if I recall, was very muscular looking, right? Or is that the same fat guy that you're thinking of? Because I was thinking of their boss when you said fat guy.
Yeah, Hector, the final boss. He's not muscular.
Is that the rival?
He's pear-shaped. No, Domino.
Domino was the guy I'm thinking of.
Dom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Domino.
Yeah, Dom boxes in his office.
That's right.
And then, I want you to look up a picture of Manny's boss. I can't remember what his name is now. But I feel like...
Yeah, this guy. Don Copal.
Even though he's a skeleton, they somehow gave him enough hair to make him look bald.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
That's amazing, right?
It's just so fitting for the
So
jerky,
much personality.
big gut boss.
Right. Who's just like, I'm past my prime, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. I'm pretty sure he didn't sound like that, but
Yeah, he kind of did.
he kind of did.
He had that gruff, almost like Bob Hoskins.
Yeah.
kind
So
of
there
voice.
was, man. Okay. So all of the skeletons, I don't think we mentioned this yet, right? That this game combines influences from film noir,
Mm-hmm.
from a variety of like religious undertones and overtones from South America, I believe, right?
Mexico.
Mexico, Middle America. What was that?
Central America.
Central America. Why did I say Middle America? That's not a thing. Like Middle
That's
Earth.
Omaha.
Okay.
Somewhere middle
Central America. Sorry. Whew. I am American. You have to forgive me. I know like almost next to nothing about geography. I don't know why that is. Why is that a running joke?
Outside of the U.S.? Because who cares?
Right? Because this is America.
America's number one.
Okay.
Love it or
anyways.
leave it.
Some people are. Anyways. Yeah. So those influences, and then on top of that, they included the Dias de los Muertos,
Which is
Day
Mexican
of the Dead.
festival.
Right. Festival of the Dead. With these ornate sort of designs on all of the skulls, which give them unique flavors of personality. So like Manny, I always felt like he was furrowing his brow, right? He's kind of frustrated
Yeah.
with his position.
I always thought that.
Yeah, frustrated with his position in unlife and, stuck at this dumpy job for a debt that, we don't fully understand. But then, yeah, like you were saying with his boss having that tuft of what resembles hair, but obviously can't be hair.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. It's not hair, but it's also like Salvador has a mustache. But like you were saying, it's not hair. It's like the Day of the Dead, where it's like penciled on them.
Right. It's like a painted design.
Only
kind
on
of
their
thing.
actual skull.
On their actual skull. Yeah, this game has an amazing mix of influences. They're super great, super great.
And very strange ones. Who would have thought to mix Mexican religious folklore with film noir?
I don't know. How? I mean, and the obvious thing would have been to make Manny a detective, right?
Right.
So she's been like, oh, this is Tracer Bullet. She walked into my office. I could smell her cologne and all this stuff,
She had a bone to pick with me.
Yeah. And then skeleton jokes. She kept ribbing me about this job, Yeah.
She walked right into the joint.
Oh, now I gotta say one. I got nothing. Yeah.
To be a continued.
All I know is Grim Fandango.
Nothing?
What? What'd you say?
I said, well, then I guess to be a continued.
To be continued?
Because a tibia is a bone in your leg.
Oh, darn it. You know what? I was just going to say Grim Fandango is such a good game. People are dying to play it. That's stupid. All right, let's move on from that. So we talked about several of the characters already. Just want to see if there were any that we missed. I think this is a great game for NPCs.
It's one of the best.
A great game for NPCs. We've lost, okay, soapbox time. We've lost the ability to create great, memorable NPCs.
Yes.
There are beautiful games that create amazing protagonists these days.
Mm-hmm.
God of War talked up all the time, and I'm sure justly so. But how many times do you hear about NPCs in that game?
I've never heard of one.
Right. You talk about, I mean, the core of the game is the relationship between the God of War and his son, as it should be. I'm thinking specifically, too, about Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn had an amazing protagonist, Aloy. Great game. Very, very, very small cast of characters.
Did you say Aloy?
Aloy. Aloy? Is that how it's pronounced in the game?
I don't
Have
know.
you played it?
I haven't played it.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it's Aloy.
I just assumed it was Alloy.
No. That'd be too easy. It only has one L. Aloy.
Well, I know, but...
Okay, because what's the rule? If there's one consonant that's separating two
when it comes to
consonants...
names, there aren't rules.
Okay. Whatever, Brent. But,
I've just never heard... I've never said Aloy in my head, and I was going to say I've never heard anybody say it, but I don't know if I've ever heard anybody...
Yeah, I'm
say
pretty
her
sure
name
it's
at all
Aloy. I'm
anyway.
pretty sure. Okay, if it's Aloy, listeners, if it's Aloy, share this podcast. If it's Alloy,
Still share the podcast.
anyways, but yeah, not a lot of memorable NPCs except
No.
for that guy that makes there's a guy in Horizon Zero Dawn that makes a really weird like turtle face when you talk to him. Yeah, that's like the most memorable character.
We kind of touched on the same thing when the Earthbound episode too. It really...
Oh, Earthbound's got amazing NPCs.
And you know what's interesting about Earthbound is it's very much not about the people outside of your party. I mean, the theme of the game is like friendship and family.
Right. Well,
Even though you're saving the world, and it
yeah.
makes sense for you to have more interaction and interesting interaction with NPCs.
yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting at the end of the game to sort of bring the friendship concept home. There is Paula's prayer that kind of reaches out to all these people that you've met.
Yeah.
Right? But very much what you're saying, though, when you meet an NPC, like when you meet that guy standing on the roof, Everdread, you meet him, you do the thing, and then you never see him again.
Right.
He's just done. Memorable, but forget about it. The trumpet guy that plays the...
Yeah.
And then he's done.
Yep.
And that's it. The happy cultists. Once they're done, they're done.
I still, just because of Earthbound, when I play a game, I still talk to all NPCs more than once just in case they're going to say something different.
Just in case. Well, and some games do.
Hardly ever anymore.
Well,
though.
yeah, but
now it's more like just an OCD tendency than actual...
You know what I don't like is when you're walking through town and NPCs will just start talking.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, now I got to stop for this conversation. I don't know what they're going to say. And then you can't interact with them directly. You just have to stand and listen to a conversation. Typically, it's world building because now worlds are much more complex. But I miss NPCs that had multi-layered dialogue and were just really quirky. Like this game.
GTA still does it.
Really?
Yep.
I've never played
I would say I've literally spent hours in GTA 5 just following people around to hear what they say.
Wow.
Because they talk to each other, and if you find someone talking on a cell phone walking down the street, they'll have a whole conversation.
Wow. See, I've never played. I couldn't tell you.
And some of it is really funny. But there's just not a lot of that anymore.
There's a character I'm thinking of in Grim Fandango. He's not on this list of characters. He was very minor. The balloon tying guy that stood out there and like it just had some of the best dialogue ever. What, he would like insult you for like standing? He was like, you're the kind of person who would stand around watching a guy tying balloons over and over again. And you're like, oh my gosh, he's talking about me.
And then when you get the empty balloons from him, you can only get, 2 or 3 at a time or something. And then he's like, I think you've had enough.
Yeah.
Like they're drinks or something.
Really great. I mean, even looking at this list of NPCs, there's quite a few.
There are.
Yeah.
And most of them are great. They all, like you said, it's not just world building. You could really see, you get the feeling that all these characters have a whole other story in life outside of the scene that you're in with.
Yes. Perfect example. Carla, the lady that Manny's flirting with. She's got the metal detector.
Oh,
it's
yes.
like later, like I want to say like the final third of the game or something like that. That felt very much like she had someplace else she wanted to be, even though she didn't explicitly tell you. So there's a difference. There's world building, right? But there's world building through characters that exist in this world already and hint at a sense of their other lives, or in this case, unlives, in ways that aren't so direct. And then there's just straight up exposition, right? So a lot of games kind of do exposition, where they'll just be like, yeah, so this guy on this mountain, he's up there. If only a hero would come to stop it. Like, does anybody talk like this? Really? And then there's people that you deliberately engage with in conversation that's much more, I'd want to say robust or fleshed out. But that's not really what I mean. I guess much more complex interactions. Complex interactions with NPCs is something that I think we should see more often. If anything, I think you could learn a lot from the interactions with NPCs in Grim Fandango. If we could see stuff like this, dialogue like this, not even necessarily like humorous dialogue, but if we could see interactions like this in modern AAAs, that'd be great.
Realistic interactions. I mean, that's like you were saying. It's very obvious when dialogue is just exposition. It's the same reason people don't like exposition dialogue in a movie. It sounds unnatural, and it takes you out of it. Right.
I mean, you're a fan of the 1980s text crawl, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like, you turn on a 80s film and it's just like, oh, I gotta read now?
Yeah, always.
Like, it's like 15 paragraphs at the beginning.
Even when it's short stuff, like at the beginning of The Running Man.
Yeah.
It's like 2 or 3 sentences, and it's like, you could have just worked that into a conversation.
Said that to me. Yeah. Yeah, or have a narrator or something. This is not a book. Anyways. So point and click adventures is what we're talking about here. And adventure games generally. Now, earlier we were talking about our history with adventure games. What sort of history do you have with adventure games?
None.
0.
Yeah.
So is this
I've played Grim Fandango, and I've played Machinarium.
Machinarium.
Yeah.
What was that like? I haven't even heard of that one before.
It's more simplistic. You're like it's been so long. You're a robot of some kind, and it's typical point and click, solve puzzles.
Okay.
Kind of thing. It was good. I liked it.
Yeah.
And I remember liking the story. There's no dialogue, I don't think, but I think that was my first and only up until I played Grim Fandango Remastered, and I haven't played one since for some reason. As much as I loved Grim Fandango, I just haven't gotten back around to any others yet.
Now, I've played a couple since, and it is hard to find something similar to Grim Fandango.
Yeah, I'm worried I almost spoiled myself by starting with
the best one. There's other really great ones that I know you'd appreciate, but finding them's tough, especially something that's later, I would say. I don't know. That sounds snobby, so I'm not going to say it again. I say snobby things all the time. I apologize. I'm kind of the opposite from you. I played a lot of adventure games when I was a kid, specifically point and click. Played all the King's Quests. Really loved King's Quest.
Okay.
Have you never played?
No.
Okay. Same sort of thing. Item acquisition, item puzzles, combination puzzles. I think it's King's Quest 3, the one where you play as the apprentice to a wizard. Yeah, King's Quest 3, To Err is Human. You play as the apprentice to this wizard, and I always loved just exploring the wizard's house. When he was there, in the house. You had to do like servant stuff for him. But then he'd be like, I'm leaving on a trip. Screw you. And then he'd just leave. And you could kind of explore around, but you never really knew when he would come back. I think he would leave 3 times, and on the 3rd time, he'd be gone for like a long time, or maybe forever. I can't remember. But
so what if he came back?
So if he came back and caught you, like messing around in his room, he had like a secret lab that you could find and go down and start messing around with potions. But if he found you, he would turn you into a frog, and then you'd have to play as a frog for the rest of the game. Essentially, you can't beat the game. You'd have to restart.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. It was hardcore.
No kidding.
Yeah. Speaking of hardcore, the path down the Wizard's Mountain was this super tiny pixelated path. And if you made one misstep, you just fall to your death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was very much old school. Like, we don't care if it's hard. It's hard. But you could type in certain things. I thought it was hilarious when I was a terrible child to go up to the wizard's cat that was like super mean to you, and you could actually type in kick cat and it would like kick the cat and the cat would like run from you and stuff like that. It was, great game. So the King's Quest, not a great game for that reason, let me qualify. but yeah,
don't kick cats.
Well, I'm like now, like I'm like that's kind of screwed up, but anyways, this is a digital cat. I wouldn't do that to a real cat. One of my favorite adventure games, Maniac Mansion, that I just showed you a little bit of today. Yes. I highly suggest you play that, sir.
That one hasn't been remastered yet, right?
So I think there are fan remasters that exist online that you can play. And then I know Maniac Mansion was included in Day of the Tentacle.
I did hear that.
But I haven't played Day of the Tentacle as much as I like Maniac Mansion.
But the Day of the Tentacle remaster has the original version of Maniac Mansion.
Right.
Right. Not.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's just strange that they remastered Tentacle, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango,
but not
Maniac Mansion.
Because Maniac Mansion is super iconic too.
Right.
I mean, like you've heard of it, even though you played it. Yeah.
I'd heard of it when I was a kid.
Yeah. I loved Maniac Mansion so much. I played it on the NES a ton and the C64. And I loved it so much. So this was before I knew it was on the NES. I found it in a hobby store when I was like 5 or 6 or something like that, really young. And it was on a floppy disk. Or whatever platform that was. I don't know. I was young. And I bought it. I asked to buy it, and I bought it, even though I didn't even have a computer, because I just loved this game so much. And it wasn't until like 2003 that I had my first computer. And by then, it wouldn't play on that.
It didn't even have a floppy disk.
Right, drive. Yeah. No, it did. I remember it had a floppy disk drive because I wrote things and put them on floppy disks.
You had a floppy drive in 2003?
Yeah, girl, I did. Yeah. That was when I bought my first computer, and I remember specifically I wanted there to be a floppy disk drive.
Oh, you seeked it out.
Yeah, I sought it. Okay. It was no charge to add a floppy disk drive to
I can't believe that.
Yeah, well, like today it definitely would be an upcharge.
Now, I'm sure.
They're like, well, we're going to have to send you like this extra exterior peripheral.
Hipsters buying floppy drives.
Yeah, they're like, it's better than studio audio quality.
You can hear all the whirs of the mechanics inside.
Yeah. But yeah, floppy disks are tiny, and they corrode over time. So I lost like a bunch of writing that I put on floppy disks and stored there. And and now they're corrupted. So, oh well. But yeah, Maniac Mansion, great game. One of my favorite, maybe games of all time. Maybe. I was on my top 111 list. So if you count that as my favorite games of all time, there you go.
I would count it as that.
Yeah. So this game, Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders.
Which I still have not played.
Oh my gosh.
I know, we've talked about it.
Yeah. You want to talk about like humor in games.
Is that a LucasArts also?
I'm pretty sure. Oh yeah, it like exudes LucasArts. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. There are remasters of it for sure you can find online. The original I remember playing DOS. Heck yeah. But yeah, that was a game that you had to be really creative with the item puzzles. So like I remember one of them was you needed some kind of blunt object for something, and there was a bakery right outside your house that was closed, and you could ring the doorbell, nobody answers. You ring it again, and like a baker opens up the window above you and shouts down to the street. They're like, "Hey, dude, we're closed. Could you read?" And you ring it again. He's like, "I said we're closed." And then you ring it again, and he's like, "All right, buddy." And he throws like a piece of stale bread at you that's so stale it cracks the pavement when it hits the ground.
Wow.
So you could pick it up, take it with you. Fun stuff. But yeah, really interesting uses of, well, typically LucasArts humor. So fun stuff. Another one I played more recently was Oxenfree, adventure game about like getting stuck in time loops and stuff like that. Much more sort of ordinary but sci-fi-ish. Very cool. Elements of horror. And Broken Age, which was by Double Fine. That had Elijah Wood as one of the characters.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of the main characters was Elijah Wood.
I didn't even realize Double Fine made that. So they made that and then remastered Grim Fandango?
Yes. Now,
Okay.
before I say that they made it, even though I already said they made it.
You can cut it.
If
If it was wrong, you just cut it.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah. Developed by Double Fine.
Oh, okay.
And that was a game where you swapped between two characters in two completely different worlds, seemingly. One high fantasy, more like, and then one science fiction. And you had to piece together sort of like where they're at in this universe and how they relate to each other. Really interesting. Interesting premise, again.
You know what I just realized when you asked me earlier if I had played Broken Age? I was thinking of a different game.
Oh, really? Well, have you played this Broken Age?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay, well then it still holds
But the
true.
other one I was thinking of is the one... Is it Broken Sword? Is that what it's called?
That doesn't sound like a fun game. They're like, you get a sword, but it's broken. It is Broken Sword.
I can't believe I was right.
And it's an adventure game.
It is.
A series of adventure games.
But that's what I was thinking of when I told you that game has a puzzle that like nobody could figure out basically before the internet existed.
Oh, yeah.
That's the game I was thinking
Okay.
of.
And this is a perfect bridge into this next topic, which I want to talk about puzzles and the place of adventure games as a context. I feel like... So really, there's two reasons to play an adventure game. The story and the puzzles. The puzzles are going to be your only challenge, essentially.
Yep.
Because there's no timing, like fighting or things like that. There's no stats balancing or things like that. This is the draw of the game as far as how much it can challenge you. But in an internet age, how do you create a game and how do you create an adventure game that you can't just look up the walkthrough for and just breeze through it?
Not possible.
Yeah. I feel like there's some clever solutions that people have come up with as far as like random number generating puzzles or
Puzzles with multiple outcomes where you could look up how to get through it, but it's not going to help you discover one of the other unfound ways to do it.
Like I feel like there are games that I've played where some of the puzzles were things that I've looked up and they've been like, so this is how you solve it, but I can't actually give you the solution because whatever it is going to be unique for your version of the game. So I think that's interesting. I don't know that you could build an entire game
Probably not.
with puzzles like that. I mean, you'd probably have to be a genius to come up with that.
I think on the one hand, you have to have puzzles that... I mean, obviously you want them to be challenging, but they need to be intuitive enough that people can figure it out.
And that's a problem with some adventure games.
Right. And those are the ones where, I mean, when you're playing a game, when you're at a point when you're like, maybe I could figure this out in another 10 hours. I don't have that kind of time. I'm just going to look it up.
Right.
But if it's going to only take you 4 or 5 tries over the course of 15 or 20 minutes, you'll probably just push through it.
Well, and I think if you understand the rules of whatever the puzzle is, then that's one thing. And that could be, okay, I can figure this out. But if it's something like I'm stuck and I have no idea what to do, then you go and look it up and you're like, that's completely out of left field.
Yeah.
Then you kind of feel a little like that's a little unfair. Now, given that playing these games then in a pre-internet age or in an age where the internet wasn't so available and accessible as it is today, in a computer in your pocket, essentially, that it was more difficult to play games like these. Some of them are actually quite short. I mean, some of the King's Quest games, I've revisited it. I'm like, oh, that was short. As a kid, I remember being like, this is going to take the rest of my life to beat. Essentially because, well, when I was a kid, and it was stupid, but the other thing was some of the puzzles were just impossible.
Right.
You know, I couldn't even think in those terms.
Yeah.
So like I remember I was telling you earlier about the disembodied tentacle in Maniac Mansion, one of them who's hungry, and you have to think of like these oddball things that it wants to eat, and you know only a couple of them are going to be correct of the items that you found. You're like, well, how? This is a situation that's unprecedented, sir.
Right.
You never know what a disembodied tentacle is going to eat because you've never seen one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and in the same way, and so Grim Fandango, I felt for the most part had some really good puzzles. Definitely a lot of places where I got stuck, but the one puzzle that I think was the most unfair was the one where you had to stick the sign, the arrow sign, in the ground in the middle of the forest, this clearing, right? Because otherwise, if you ran through one of the many tunnels in this area,
You just come out one of the other
just
ones.
come out the other ones. So the tunnels were just red herrings.
Mm-hmm.
The tunnels were like non-functional, like didn't mean anything. You actually had to stick this thing in the ground in this specific area in this really large spot,
Mm-hmm.
and it would open up a path underground.
Is that what it was? You do have to go through the tunnels.
Do you?
Yeah, because I
Okay.
remember what got me was you get there and the arrow is pointing at one of the tunnels and you run through it and you come out somewhere else. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's obviously not what you're supposed to do. So you pick up the sign, you take it out of the ground and you walk around with it and whatever, and you put it down and it points to that tunnel again. And I just kept thinking, okay. So then you put it down, it points at the tunnel. Okay, I'll walk through it again. And then I'll pick it up again. And then it points it at the tunnel. And I couldn't figure it out. I think if I remember right, it points at the tunnel. You have to pick it up, carry the sign through the tunnel,
Mm-hmm.
put it in the ground again, and then it points at a different tunnel. And you have to do it 2 or 3 times before that the passageway you were talking about, before that opens up.
Okay.
And that's the part that got me was, at what point was I supposed to know I should
Stop.
carry the sign with me through
Right.
the tunnel?
Or stick it back in the ground.
Right.
Right, yeah. And it had to be in a specific spot in that clearing, right? Or you could just set it down anywhere.
I think it's in a fairly, probably maybe like a 10 or 20% of the whole clearing area.
Okay.
Kind of in the middle-ish.
I didn't like that puzzle.
No.
Yeah.
That's the only one I had to cheat and look up online how to get past. Although, I almost had to look at the end. I don't want to give away the ending, though.
Yeah, no. That's for them to find out.
The very last puzzle I mostly solved just by running around and hitting action over and over again.
Well, that's okay. Most of the puzzles in this game, maybe like what, 85%
At least.
are still silly and fun and quirky, but seem to have fairly logical solutions.
I remember at the very beginning, maybe my favorite puzzle, probably for this reason, when you first realize you need to jam up the machine that sends the orders.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the first thing I thought was, okay, well, what is tube shaped? The bread, because you can go get the bread at the festival.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just getting loaves of bread and just shoving them in
Shoving
the
them
tube
in
thing,
there.
and then they just shred into crumbs.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, how many of these do you have to do? But then after 5 or 6, I realized that's not what you had to do, and I was like, well, what else is tube shaped? Those balloons. And then I remembered it piece by piece until I solved the puzzle. And then once I did and it was right, what a feeling of accomplishment.
Yes, and that feeling of overcoming something is why hold out on just, going through a walkthrough through games like this. Try and solve it as much as you can. Try and beat it as much as you can on your own. Use your gray matter. And if you can't, then that's okay. It's all right to be like, well, I'm not going to spend 15 hours on this one puzzle.
And that was one, too, where it was easy enough for you to figure out. But like you were saying earlier, it also taught you some of the rules of the puzzles of the games. Oh, I can combine items to make a brand new thing.
Yeah.
Which obviously then comes into play later also.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good point. So it's not just a sequence of items that you have to use, but some of them create new items in interesting ways. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about humor in games in general. we were kind of talking about it earlier, that like, what is how would you describe the state of comedy in games?
Is there one?
I
would say no. I'm joking.
The state of comedy.
I get it depends, honestly. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by the comedy in Guacamelee 2. But I know, like we were talking earlier, there's a lot of just dad jokes or bad puns or literal jokes. Like, jokes were a big thing in like the 40s and 50s and vaudeville, even before that. Now it's more even like stand-ups. They go up and tell stories that are funny.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're playing a game and someone goes out of their way to make a joke,
yeah,
it really sticks out and seems awkward.
Yeah, and I feel like that's sort of relegated to characters that are meant to do that. So like we would say, and this is more used for film, but it's used a lot in games too, which is the comedic relief character, right? And I feel like games more so than films, given there's a variety of films that do this extremely poorly. But games don't dial back on comedic relief characters as much as they should.
Mm-hmm.
A great comparison thing for that in films is think Gimli's character, but across the 3 Lord of the Rings films. In the first film, he's presented sort of as this noble, gruff, but like dignified character. Stubborn, all the things that we associate with high fantasy dwarves. Then you get into Two Towers, and it starts to become sort of like his height is a running gag, his dwarfism is a running gag. And then by the time you get to the third film, the dude's just like, he's C-3PO in Empire Strikes Back. Like everything he says is like,
ridiculous.
Yeah, supposed to be.
You don't even understand how his colleagues still respect him.
Right, exactly. It was completely opposite. I mean, when you read the book, Gimli, and of course, there's always going to be differences between books and film, 2 different storytelling modes. But Gimli in the books is very much like a Beowulfian kind of like hardcore warrior character. Same thing with Legolas. You couldn't picture him, surfing down a stairwell on a shield.
And what's interesting is it's almost like that shift in Gimli's tone kind of happened when they started introducing the competition between him and Legolas.
Mm-hmm. Which is in the book too, I'm pretty sure. I think.
But what I don't get is why he ends up being such a laughingstock by like you said, by the third movie, and Legolas's character didn't go that way at all.
Because he's cute.
Is that
that's
it?
Why.
Is that all?
He's handsome. That's it. I think so. Yeah. Well, I think that's our association with value and beauty. Orlando.
Because even in the Two Towers, it seemed like it wasn't just a healthy competition. It was almost you could tell the competition was out of respect for the other.
Uh-huh.
And then, like you said in the third one, I don't know. I don't feel like I didn't still see it that way.
Yeah.
He's kind of a laughingstock to me by that point.
Right. It's like everything he says is meant to deflate the tension of a scene, or like, well, still only counts as one. When he kills the Oliphant.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. But that whole scene is ridiculous anyway.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so getting back to Grim Fandango, humor in games.
I actually think
that was good. I don't think we went too far, because we were saying essentially this is what games do. They create Return of the King Gimlis, and not so much. Well, I think like who was comedic relief in Fellowship? Merry and Pippin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was their character explicitly from the beginning of this movie. So that when you see them in Two Towers and they're sitting there drinking, the mead and the and smoking.
But then even them, you get to see actual character growth out of them.
Right.
They mature
exactly.
past that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
and
not.
Gimli goes the opposite way for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not just like, a couple of. And that's the fun thing about those characters too. It's not that they just stay at that point of, I could picture myself at the prancing pony and just talking and having this fun time just through the whole films. Right. But you get to see depth of character. I think it's brilliant that Tolkien isolated them, right? That separated them to allow them to grow. And sort of like that trope we were talking about earlier, when you remove the mentor from the protagonist's life.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely with Gandalf. When Gandalf is gone, then Frodo's like, well, now I'm going to make the decision to take the ring into Mordor, and I can't hold Gandalf's hand
Right.
while doing that.
Right.
So, but to bring that to Fandango and to games, I do think that games create more Return of the King Gimlis than otherwise.
I think, because you were saying like comic relief, I think it's not comic relief, it's just non-serious relief.
Because comic implies that it's funny.
Exactly.
Right.
And to go back to what we were talking about earlier with like Final Fantasy 15, those characters aren't funny.
Yeah.
But Prompto is very the opposite of how serious everybody else is.
Yeah.
He's kind of goofy and quirky, but he's not funny.
But even to so I get what you're saying there. So like with Noctis, Gladio, Ignis, they're more serious than Prompto, but I never felt that I could take them seriously.
Well, that's
You know,
part of the anime
right.
trope
Yeah.
discussion.
Like with
again.
like with Noctis, it's like, dude, your father died. I'm sorry, spoilers, Final Fantasy 15. It's in the trailer, for crying out loud.
Right.
Like a father died, kingdom's lost. This is like first 5 minutes of the game, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you decide to go fishing or
Right.
track around looking at some chick's rack
Mm-hmm.
in your souped up car with your bro dudes. Like, and this is the game.
And then
right?
the car breaks down and you're not like, we have this super important thing to get to. You're like, this sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much like it's a laid back approach to RPG playing.
Do you think some of that I hadn't thought about that before this conversation just now, but do you think some of it has to do with just the cultural differences? Like Grim Fandango was made by Americans.
Mm-hmm.
We are Americans. Our sense of humor is more in line with theirs than would be Japanese people who are making a game that's just
Right.
being translated.
I think that that's become less of an issue over time as the world gets smaller. Certainly, there's more collaboration between East and West thematically and structure. Square has its headquarters here as well as in Japan. So does Nintendo.
So they just couldn't hire anybody funny.
I mean, well, maybe. I mean, what is the proverb? Death is easy, comedy is hard. Dying is easy, comedy is hard for acting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Comedy takes so much more wit and timing and execution, all this. Whereas like dying, anybody can die, like for real or not for real, and just like, yeah. But with Grim Fandango, though, something that I think we can appreciate about the humor is its variety.
Mm-hmm.
It's personality driven. So you touched on with comedic relief about the comedic part. I'd like to touch on the relief part. So my perspective of comedic relief is largely why it's typically unnecessary is typically you don't need the relief.
Mm-hmm.
That implies that a scene is too intense for the viewer. In the case of Return of the King, is there any scene in that movie that's so intense that you need Gimli to come up and high five the screen?
Not for me.
Yeah.
No.
Right. But again, we're adults, so on and so forth. And surely that mileage may vary for age ranges and so on. But I don't feel like those movies are so intense that they need to have deflation. Right. And two, they're long enough to where they can give themselves breathing room, and then that deflates the tension as well. So one of the great things in Return of the King is this tension between Gandalf and Denethor, right? The steward of Gondor, and Faramir, who's going to be burned alive. And like they're like, he's not dead, but Denethor's like clearly going insane. There's this great scene where it depicts Gandalf the White sitting, in an alleyway somewhere, just thinking. Mm-hmm. And it's such a quiet moment in the middle of everything that's about to happen. This bombastic, huge, widely, greatly produced battle sequence. That's like the biggest battle sequence we'd ever seen on film up to that point. And then the death of Faramir too. that's impending. And Gandalf just has this moment where he sits quietly thinking about it. Maybe, thinking about his failures, maybe thinking about the death of his friend and everything that's about to happen. But it gives the audience a chance to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And that is relief.
Right.
That's deflating tension. Another thing, and I know you're going to agree with me on this one, is the MCU. You and I aren't really fans of the MCU too much.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, I would probably... I've been thinking about giving it another chance, but the last film I watched was Age of Ultron. And talk about comedic relief. The whole film is relief. But then what is it relieving you from?
Right.
What is you've got a robot that's going to destroy the entire planet by dropping a city on it. And then these guys are just cracking jokes. And if it relieves you so much that it removes all sense of tension, like a story needs tension. A story needs to have a sense of tension to keep its pace going. But if there's none of that, then yeah, I think it goes too far. And I've talked to some people who are fans of the MCU who are like, yeah, Age of Ultron.
That's kind of my issue with Iron Man, though. It's almost like, well, we cast Robert Downey Jr., so he has to make snarky jokes.
Right. And
or
given how
Starky
successful...
jokes.
Starky jokes, nice. Given how successful that film was, it sort of colored everything that was to come.
Exactly.
Now, and given there's various films within the MCU, even that I've seen, that have varying degrees of comedy, Ragnarok is extremely up there from what I've heard. It's like pretty much a comedy with Thor in it. In space.
Interesting.
But there's ones that I've seen, like Winter Soldier wasn't as like
Hulk didn't really have any of that.
Yeah, I don't know. So but anyways,
but like you were saying, what's it relief from? None of those movies are very serious. They're comic book movies. They're superhero movies.
Well, I mean, some superhero films have like some pretty Dark Knight.
Well, these are the broadest of the broad, aimed at the widest range of audience possible.
Which explains why they make so much money. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, you just don't...
You don't necessarily need all of that.
Who's going to see Avengers because I can't wait to see the jokes in it?
Right. Now, the second you say these are comedy films is the second that I'm like, you're correct.
Yeah.
That's essentially... Yeah. And then if it's a comedy film, pour the comedy in it. Pour the slather on the jokes in it. But it's not a superhero film, essentially. It's a comedy superhero film.
Yeah.
So, like Dark Knight, though, Alfred, played by Michael Caine, really great character who's super endearing. Of course, Michael Caine. Mm-hmm. But Alfred has some jokes in there. Not all of them are, hit. Some are very much miss. But he's there present to be able to ease the audience, to relieve some of the tension in certain scenes.
I think what's different with him, too, is that they build it into the character and into the scenes that he's also Bruce's comic relief.
Right.
He's trying to distract Bruce from everything he's going through.
Yeah.
Hey, why don't you crack a smile and remember that the whole world isn't just a gloomy, dark hole.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's appropriate for the character, and you see
which
the
then
world
it makes
through
it
Bruce.
not seem so stand out as, oh, this is your comic relief part, guys.
Yeah.
It's natural, and then it doesn't bother me, even if the joke doesn't land.
It's
like
sort
you
of
said.
like
it's
when...
more natural that the jokes don't land every time.
Exactly. It's sort of like when you're with somebody that's uncomfortable with silence,
mm-hmm.
And they have to say something, and they end up just putting their foot in their mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to happen with characters. But with Grim Fandango, there's so many characters that are just quirky, that build the world through their personality.
Yep.
And that are able to make the game more endearing in unique ways because they have such a wide range of personalities that seem familiar. Because again, there's film noir, themes here. So you have, like the crime boss, the things of the detective, the stuff like that are familiar, but there's plays on those things with this character being a monster, this character being,
right.
An undead skeleton and things like that.
I also like that a lot of those characters end up coming back much, much later in the game. But you remember them like you just ran into them because they were so unique, because they were so quirky, because you liked certain things about them so much. You could meet someone in the first act and not see them again until the last act and be like, oh my gosh, it's that guy.
Yeah. So just to close out on comedy, there's another proverb that something like comedy is essentially the unexpected. I can't remember it verbatim. I never can, but it's something like that. Comedy is the unexpected, right? When you don't expect, the punchline. Well, like conversely, when you know the punchline, it's not funny, right?
Right.
But when you don't expect the punchline, like roses are red, violets are blue, I have a gun, get in the van. That's funny because you hadn't heard that before.
Right.
Right? But when you're expecting, a certain character to, every time they open their mouth, they're going to say a joke. It's like a spotlight turns on the character. You're like, ladies and gentlemen, this character with a stand-up comedy routine.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like, okay, now I'm expecting it. But when things happen that are just funny, when you meet a new character in Grim Fandango and their whole personality is funny, then that's a great thing. So humor in games, I think we've got a long way to go for developing real comedy in games. Some games are, do it better than others. Grim Fandango is one that's up there that I think does comedy.
It's certainly one to look to for how to do it right.
Yeah. There was a recent, this was written by our, The Wandering Mage, a review of Donut County. I almost said country. Donut County. Couldn't get that. Donut County, which looked like a really hilarious game. You play as a hole controlled by a raccoon's app that has to go around town, the hole does, and try to get things to drop in it.
Okay.
And I was like, that alone is a funny idea. Yeah, it's interesting. But for everything you collect, it gives you like a description of the items that fall in. And she shared some of them in her review, and I was like, that's pretty funny. Like some of them are obviously like, that's kind of obvious, but like some of them are legitimately funny.
Huh.
So there's a lot of humor out there. If you're going to talk about unexpected humor, have you played Katamari Damacy? Oh my gosh. Like there's not a single thing in Katamari Damacy that's expected. I'm going to show you when we finish this.
Wait, that's the one where you roll around.
That's where you roll around. Yeah. There's nothing.
I think I played a demo of it.
Okay. That is a funny game.
I don't remember it very well.
Bizarre.
I know people love it.
Yeah. I love that game. So anyways, in closing, let's take a look and see what some folks on Twitter had to say.
I just wanted to real quick, because I forgot to mention it earlier when we were talking about premise, just some of the different influences for the game. So obviously you got Casablanca, Manny's signature white tux that he stole from Bogey.
There you go. Yeah.
And running the casino. It's like my brain put it together while I was playing it, but didn't tell me. But the whole conspiracy of the travel agency and stealing the tickets is all based on Chinatown. Which, when I read that, I was like, well, duh. And then I was thinking about it later, and I was like, why did I say duh? I didn't think about that before.
Yeah. Huh.
But it's like I knew it.
Yeah.
And then the only other one I really was thinking of, because it has nothing to do with any of the other stuff except for the death supernatural part of it, is just that the secretary from the beginning of the game always reminded me of the Ghostbusters secretary. You
too? Okay.
Always.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that she, what was it, Janine in Ghostbusters? Yeah. Did you hear they're making a third one?
I did. I saw the teaser.
So essentially that eliminates the most recent Ghostbusters one.
Yeah.
Because they're like, this is the actual third one.
Yeah, somebody asked me the other day, they're like, are the original people going to be in it? And I was like, well, it is a continuation.
Yeah.
So it'd be weird if they weren't. I mean, I know Harold Ramis won't be in it.
No, yeah.
And I'm sure Rick Moranis won't be in it.
That would be a shame. Yeah.
It'd be nice.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it would be nice.
I will be 1,000% confident in the quality of the movie if they can convince Rick Moranis to come back for it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean, if they can just get Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, that'd be cool. That would be neat.
Yeah.
But
I'd like some Sigourney Weaver, get some Ernie Hudson in there.
That would be pretty amazing to get that many people back from the original. It would be really cool. Okay, so we're online here. This is from Chris BG99 on Twitter. Love this setting and style. Made it through the first chapter a long while back, but for whatever reason, never got back to it. This is a response to that from @ErosElric. I've heard of this in point-and-click games. They become so mind-numbingly frustrating with the trial-and-error approach to puzzle solving and using random items in extremely unorthodox ways that you either advance the game or destroy the item that you can't get back. So I think that that's fairly normative for this.
I think so, but not for Grim Fandango, though.
No.
I'm trying to think of what in the first chapter you would get hung up on.
I got stuck for a little while on that pipe puzzle that you were describing earlier.
I think...
I mean, it's figure-outable. It's figure-outable. But, yeah, you could get stuck on
it. I guess, because it is one of the first ones also.
Yeah. But Chris BG99...
But I loved everything else about the game so much, I couldn't put it down no matter how frustrated
Well, he did say, for whatever reason, he never got back to it. So it could have just been, something else.
A
that's release
true.
of a
That's
game
true.
or something. At Seth Trav said, nothing is as satisfying and as frustrating as Myst, with which I have to agree.
I'll never know the feeling of satisfaction from that because it'll never happen.
Too much.
I'm not beating Myst.
There are other feelings of satisfaction to have.
Yeah, there are.
Don't necessarily have to come from Myst. This is from the Arcade Castle. What point-and-click games are the panel's favorites, or ones they feel are ones that define the genre? And also, how many clicks? So this is running gag, right? He said how many bananas in Donkey Kong Country? 0, because he had his banana hoard stolen.
That's true.
That's the answer. How many clicks?
Well, yeah, but then the answer could also be all of them, because if the question is how many bananas is he looking for?
Well, that wasn't in the question, though. It was just how many. So I gave an answer.
I have a different right answer.
Oh, there you go. Okay, they're both right. How many clicks, though?
None.
Dude, I wonder, you actually could do this. Like, how many clicks minimum does it take to beat Grim Fandango?
I'm still going to say 0 because I played it on PS4.
Oh, 0 clicks.
So no clicks for me.
No clicks. I played it on PS4 as well, or PS3, something like that. And then what point-and-click games are your favorites? You'd say this one.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, this is not point-and-click, though, right? This is just straight adventure.
No, it's point-and-click.
It has a cursor?
You know what? They changed the controls for the PS4.
Okay.
It's a point and click on the computer.
Is it? Okay.
But I don't think it's not technically point and click on the console.
I would probably say Maniac Mansion for myself.
But I feel like even if I've had played more than I have, this would probably still be my favorite one.
Yeah. Lots of love for Tim Schafer in the comments to that. Wasn't really big on point and clicks. Oh, I beg your pardon. This is from @JeffMan1490 on Twitter. I wasn't really big on point and clicks as a kid because they were confusing for me. But the educational games I played as a kid had fun point and click games like Oregon Trail. Oh, classic Math Blaster. I remember that. The Library. Carmen Sandiego.
Oh, Carmen Sandiego.
Magic School Bus Games. Reader Rabbit. Oh, man. That reading that was a nostalgic blast. That was a great comment to read. Thank you. Let's see what else we got on here. Oh, this is a shout out to Nerd House on Twitter, who said he'd never played it before.
Oh.
Well, I hope at the end of this podcast, once you reach the end, if you listen to it,
play it immediately.
This is especially for you. It's a call to action to play Grim Fandango.
Those of you who know Nerd House, do not stop bothering him until
there you go. That's good. That's good. Every day,
everybody tweet him.
Yeah, just be like, play Grim Fandango. Play Grim, and say it, write it in that tone, okay? Play Grim Fandango. This is from Adventure Game G. Although, to be honest, it's not one of my personal favorites. The production design, music, and voice acting are all top-notch. And seeing the voice actors reunite at E3 last year for the 20th anniversary was dead cool. Did you watch that?
No.
So that was I saw it, but I didn't have a chance to watch it.
I didn't even know that happened.
I'll
watch it now.
Yeah, it was like a reading of the script by the voice actors.
Oh, awesome.
So had to be really cool. I heard just a tiny snippet of it. I forget what I was doing.
I'd love to see someone voicing Glottis.
That'd be amazing. Like their face turns inside out. Just, yeah, thank you for your comment. I like, and to that highlights a point I'm trying to popularize, that you can say games are real good and masterpieces and still not like them.
You should still block him.
No. not a personal favorite, but still a good game. And conversely, say this is a game I really like, but it's not the best game in the world.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. Read that one. This is from Games with Coffee, our own hyperactive coffee mage.
Yeah.
Grim is one of my favorite games I recently got into. I'm so excited. So super excited, because remember, he likes coffee. Super excited to see this happen, referring to our podcast. So I hope you enjoy it. So I think we'll probably draw it there, ladies and gents. Thank you, Brent, for coming to visit, dude.
Oh, are we going to talk about
Or would you want to talk
similar
about
recommendations?
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to get there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, now you
Why
let
don't I
the-
just ruin the whole
No,
thing?
yeah. Get out. My house. Never. Just kidding. That's what I was going to say. I was going to thank you. And then I was going to say, just give us your last. And this is going to be hard for you, right? Because you haven't played too many adventure
I thought
games.
about it this morning
Oh,
already. Don't worry.
okay. All right. Oh, you've been on a couple of Mage casts before. So just a similar game that you'd recommend.
So I'm going to go similar in not gameplay.
Right. Which is
ways.
fine. Yeah.
So then you're not going to be surprised by what I say, which is Guacamelee 1 and 2.
Oh my gosh. Shut up about Guacamelee.
If everyone would just play them, I could.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So obviously the Mexican folklore, the Day of the Dead, the Land of the Dead.
The humor.
The humor, certainly. The fun.
Fun factor.
I think Grim Fandango is very fun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of experience with point-and-click adventures, but I would be surprised if many of them had even close to the fun factor that Grim Fandango does. That's part of why I couldn't put it down.
Oh, there you go.
And that's part of not just the gameplay, but everything we talked about. The music, the humor, the world, the NPCs just makes it a fun place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be mine.
Okay. Well, I would say I'm waffling between two. Broken Age is one and made by Double Fine. So a lot of the same brand of humor and quirky NPCs and just a bizarre, funny, silly, surreal world in a lot of ways. But I really just want to talk about Zach McCracken again. Okay, if you guys have not played, and so many people have not played this, if you're an adventure fan and you have not played Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, you need to play it. Okay, like tall-headed aliens that hide in like 10-gallon hats because those are the only hats that fit their heads. It's such like a funny concept. You have to travel to, where is it? Washington, I think it is. And there's a two-headed squirrel that you have to confront and figure out how to beat in order to... It's not a fighting game. You have to figure out how to conquer it in order to get into this cave to an alien relic. Amazing, funny, silly game by classic Lucas.
Did you answer what your favorite adventure is? It Zach McCracken?
No, I think I said Maniac Mansion,
okay.
which that's definitely true. But one that I'd recommend that's similar, especially in silliness and surrealism, is Zach McCracken. So to look at it, I understand. To look at it, it looks very ordinary. He plays a guy in a tie, like for crying out loud. But it is a funny game. Yeah.
I actually have one more question for you before we wrap up.
Ooh.
So why do you think point-and-click adventure games have largely disappeared?
That's an interesting question.
Because they were a pretty huge deal in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming. That's it. No, I think that the internet had a large thing to do with that. Again, like we were talking earlier, it's harder to design a game that's a strictly like textual item acquisition chain of events puzzle game when the internet exists. And you just be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna walk through this.
Yeah, but you could almost make that same argument to say, why would you ever play one of these games a second time? Because you already know the answers to the puzzles.
Essentially, but I haven't played Grim Fandango a second time. I probably would wait a few more years to play it. Maniac Mansion had the interesting thing where you had to pick different party members, and that affected how you played the game.
Okay.
So that gives it some extra replay value. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they're kind of slow games. They're not like, so a lot of puzzle games will be like more, what's the word, like tactile or something like that. Tetris is the big classic example. But things that require an element of skill and timing involved, and the speed of your thinking. Whereas with point and click, you kind of have a lot of rumination time, a lot of time to be able to just think about what's happening, and then getting stuck is something that nobody really likes to do. I don't know if people liked to do that back then. Who were like, oh, I love games getting stuck in it. I don't think anybody ever actually liked that, but that was what there was.
It was just more acceptable.
Right, because you didn't have an easy solution out of it.
I guess the first argument you made there would make sense, because that would be the same argument probably for why the standard JRPG has also declined so much. Just a lot of that rumination time.
Yeah. Thinking about JRPGs recently, there's a lot of incidental storytelling in JRPGs. There was. I don't play them too much anymore, but there might be now. I don't know.
It's hard to find any these days.
Well, like I was playing Octopath Traveler. That's a big example, and given there's a ton of obscure JRPGs to play. But Octopath had a ton of incidental storytelling where things just happen to characters. There's not a character-driven story. In a lot of ways, it's hard to get invested in that unless it starts off really strong with a character and you care about everything that happens to them. But if something happens to a character, like what's a typical JRPG thing? Like they just happen to run across a sword that contains the ghost of their father,
right.
Secret of Mana, right? Or they just happen to you discover that they're the chosen one or whatever, and the evil empire is out to get just them, and it's like, oh, what? It's sort of like that never really happens too often in life, I don't think.
Right.
I don't know. It feels like, I guess there's a combination of both. Like things just happen to you, like accidents, right? And then it's, we try in our various different worldviews to try and make sense of that and give it some meaning possibly. But we also try to control the way our lives flow by making important decisions and things like that. Who you marry, who, you go out with, what kind of school you go to, what kind of job you get, kind of, all the way down, what kind of products you buy, clothes you wear, kind of person you're going to present yourself to other people. But I don't know that the incidental storytelling is as powerful as character driven. So maybe that's one thing with, I don't know. And like we were saying earlier, comedy is hard with point and clicks. I think point and clicks thrive as comedies because of the number of combinations of items and the amount of NPC interaction that's relevant, and the exploration of a world that's capable. But maybe people just aren't into designing that sort of thing. There's that game Thimbleweed Park that we were talking about earlier. Neither of us have played it.
That's true.
Yeah. But it seems like when most people talk about point-and-click adventures, they talk about ones from like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
which I think that's what made me think of it. It's just odd.
Yeah.
For as big as it was and as beloved as it was, and still is by a lot of people looking back on it fondly, it's just surprising that there's not more of them springing up.
No, it's an interesting question, and you guys listening, if you have, kind of an answer to that question, let us know. I mean, this is something that, like, we're doing a podcast, but we're not, like, experts on this stuff. I mean, I am. I don't know about Brent.
I definitely am.
Okay. Well, we both are experts on this stuff.
We're mages on this stuff.
Oh, yeah, we're mages on this stuff. But we don't know everything. So I don't know why point and clicks diminished over time in popularity and frequency of presence in the market. I don't know. It'd be interesting to...
Probably just because LucasArts went under.
Yeah, just because that. They were funny. Yeah. Anyways, thanks you guys for listening to this podcast. Thank you, Brent, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, anytime. Anybody that wants to visit me, my number is...
Now you just need to come out east and do an episode of SideQuest.
Ooh, that'd be pretty good.
That would be
cool. I will never come east, though. It's too cold.
After you move, you really, I don't know. I don't think you'll be all that far from me.
Oh, that's true.
I mean,
all right.
By not that far, I mean 6 or 8 hours.
Right, as opposed to like 28.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of MageCast as much as I did. If so, please follow, subscribe, share, and leave us a review to help us reach a wider audience. If you enjoy our work, please consider supporting us and our vision for the future of gaming conversations through patreon.com/thewellreadmage. Special thanks to my Mage League colleague Brent Mead for sound editing. The MageCast theme song, Post Atmosphere, was composed by fellow mage Russell Gordon and can be found on his YouTube and SoundCloud. This episode may be over, but the legend will live on, passed down by the dwarves, the elves, and the dragons.